Hey everyone, this is Chiro, and today we're going to be talking about technology a bit. Now, I recently watched Blade Runner 2047. I know, it's crazy it took me this long to watch it, right? It's been out forever. But it was great. It was really good, and it really kind of brought up a couple questions I had with, the future of technology. In a very similar way to something like Cyberpunk, or I played this post-apocalyptic cat game called Stray. Similar thing, right? But yeah, so cyberpunk dystopias are interesting, right? They definitely have like some cool aesthetics, right? So when you're playing something like cyberpunk, it's very interesting. It's very showy. It's very flashy. It's very engaging. Yeah, there's advertisements everywhere. There's people everywhere. All types of crazy people. You see someone with like a bunch of robot arms. You see, I don't know. You see a businessman with like some robot eyes that has his AI assistant doing all this other bullshit. You have some homeless dude that has a bunch of augments on him. You see all types of crazy shit. Cyberpunk dystopias are pretty interesting. I think on the surface they're very engaging, but there's like a sense of dread throughout it that I think I've picked up on in just about every cyberpunk dystopia. There's this sense of like interesting on the surface and substanceless under the surface, right? Or like like deeply vain, like a lot of vanity is kind of what it feels like in these universes. And I think it kind of speaks to technology as a whole, what it does, right? It's very engaging, very interesting. There's a lot of possibilities. It definitely has some good sides, right? It has some great sides. Like I get to watch like any show I want to watch. I can look up any paper I want to watch or read. I can look up anything, right? I can stay entertained for the rest of my life and never do a single thing, right? It's interesting. We can also, get an AI chat model to do all our work or do all our schoolwork or take a test for us or write a paper for us and publish it and try to be an author, when it's ChatGPT's work, right? There's definitely a lot of possibilities, and you see all these AI data centers that are probably, well, a lot of it, they've worked on the human genome a lot because that's like a lot of big data that you have to crunch, and they've made a lot of progress in that field. Like, it's not all bad, right? So technology has this sheen to it. It's like, hey, this is very interesting, but I think the downsides are becoming more apparent. All right, I think we're definitely having a couple ones. So the two I really want to talk about right now is our mental health. I think it really, really screws up our mental health. It's very unnatural in the sense of like we haven't seen this we've not lived in a world like this for more than 100 years, and we've been around for millions. So this is this is a big step in advancement, and evolution definitely hasn't had time to catch up, right? So I think it's horrible for our mental health, and I also think it's horrible for our job prospects and like our financial life and our like level of success in a hyper capitalist society. I'm not going to go into a critique of hyper capitalism, right? But that's kind of what we're in, and I think we're definitely going to start seeing some problems with technology advancing in this type of society. So first of all, I'm going to talk about mental health, right? I think a big thing about technology use is you stay inside all the time. Also, you stay entertained all the time, so you don't really have to engage with other people as much. It's more of like a private thing, watching technology. Of course, you watch a movie with your girlfriend, play some games with your friends, but largely, your technology use is doom scrolling by your fucking self. All right, it's not really the most productive shit ever, and it's definitely not social. So here, I'm gonna tell you a couple of things that I read into. Okay, so Torre Bon-Saxon et al. Associations between social media use and loneliness in a cross-national population. So more time spent on social media was associated with more loneliness, a p-value of under 0.001. So very statistically significant for those statistic people out there. Yeah, definitely. I can feel that the more time I'm online, the more my loneliness increases. I don't think that's an isolated event. I think a lot of people have very similar things. So CivicScience, they did some polls, right? So the first poll had 16,000 respondents, and 57% of 18 to 24-year-olds felt somewhat strongly lonely. And the graph was going up over time. The other ones kind of peaked, the other age groups kind of peaked in COVID and then went back down, but 18 to 24-year-olds seem to be consistently increasing. Saying that maybe something is maybe got permanently screwed up in our development, or it was just, or the fact that we are just like chronically online generation. Okay, so they also had another poll of 1,300 plus. This isn't quite as big, but 52% say somewhat / very dependent on technology for forms of escapism. So this is kind of like a double-edged sword, right? Or a double-pronged approach. Not, I guess double-edged sword is the wrong one, but double whammy, right? So you're more lonely, and then to escape that, you're probably going to use technology more. And then because you use it more, you're going to be more lonely, and you're going to use it more to escape. Classic addiction cycle, but not super verified or anything, just some polls, but I think it's very telling along with some of the other literature. So the World Health Organization says this about loneliness. A lot of people think it's just I don't want to feel lonely, but it has some serious health and financial risks to being lonely, right? So WHO says, in contrast, loneliness and social isolation increase the risk of stroke, heart disease, diabetes, cognitive decline, and premature death. It also affects mental health, with people who are lonely twice as likely to get depressed. Loneliness can also lead to anxiety and thoughts of self-harm or suicide. It also goes on to say the impacts extend to learning and employment. Teenagers who felt lonely were 22% likely to get lower grades or qualifications. Adults who are lonely may find it harder to find or maintain employment and may earn less over time. So yeah, it's going into, hey, your health is gonna suffer, right? And you also might, find it more difficult to get employment, which, of course, with how expensive everything is, your health will probably suffer more because you can't really afford good groceries, can't afford a stable living position. Just in general, people are suffering, and loneliness is largely driven by our technology use, and we use it more to avoid it, and it's definitely negatively impacting our lives. So, and it's not just that, right? So the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, said that nearly 40% of global jobs are exposed to AI-driven changes, meaning some tasks within those jobs could be automated or altered, even if the job itself isn't fully eliminated. So, this is kind of freaky. This is going into, hey, so it's not only the fact that we're using more and becoming more lonely that we're doing bad in jobs. It's also AI, which is, again, like I said earlier, it's very, very good for big data crunches. So something like the field of genetics is really good for this, right? And I'm sure there are some other fields that are, vastly benefiting from this AI boom. I think a lot of the coding, they can do more with less employees. But again, right, that means that there's less employed people. So, you have less people that can do more work, and there's less, need for employment. And, well, this leads to a lot of people becoming unemployed, a lot of those being younger people that don't have as much experience, right? Because if you're a job, you're going to hire an experienced person, then you don't have to train them, right? You don't really care about helping the youth, especially in such a hyper-capitalist hellscape, right? But see, the problem is, right, if we lived in a more equal society, of course, the government would be like, okay, we have an excess of money, we have an excess of productivity, we don't really need to employ everyone, so we can start, supporting the people that can't get employment, that are looking for it, or maybe they can contribute to society in other ways. I can't give you a theory for reforming government, but of course, you'd have some kickbacks to all this money that's, being made with less people and less oversight. That's all going to the top, would be recirculated back down and lead to a more progressive, equal society that, has a lot more benefits and pleasures. But no, it's staying at the top. So a lot of people are really struggling, even though, our GDP goes up. That's a common argument. Oh, our GDP's up, right? What are you complaining about? It's hey, that's only, benefiting a couple people. So continuing onward, so the World Economic Forum also found a very similar thing. Surveys indicate that employer expectations differ, but about 40% expect workforce reductions where AI can automate tasks. Yeah, yeah, I think that's definitely going to be a big problem, because I think a lot of jobs are more or less like placeholder jobs. I've heard some people describe it as adult daycare, right? Where your husband goes off to work and fucking sits in a cubicle for 10 hours, maybe answers a couple of emails. Who knows what the hell he's doing, right? But a lot of jobs are like this that largely can just be replaced with AI. Call centers, I hate it because I want to speak to a person, because AI is not quite that good yet, right? But that's like another field where it's largely just going to get replaced with AI, right? And so we have this mass reduction in number of jobs, and young people are obviously less qualified, more depressed, less likely to, step up to the plate even if they do get the job, more lonely, their health is worse, and it's just, kind of just like they just entered like a boxing ring of technology, and it makes it worse to the society we're in. The World Economic Forum also went on to say, this is in South Korea, right? So youth employment in South Korea has seen its most significant decline over the decade, with the number of workers aged 25 to 29 falling by 98,000 in the first quarter of 2025. This marks the country's steepest drop in 12 years. And this was closer to the economic crisis that happened. I forget exactly which one it is, but that's closer to the stock market crash, right? And so you could expect that type of job to be reduced at that time. But so overall, what we're seeing, right? We're seeing young people more depressed, more lonely, using social media or using technology a lot more, and especially to obfuscate these problems. They're trying to use it to ignore it, to be a distraction. They're also, they're less likely to get jobs because most of their jobs are being taken from them. And yeah, it's just all around bad. And you can go on forever about the negative consequences of technology. You go on forever for the positive consequences of technology. But I think that, people really need to be careful about their technology use, because it's a dark future for the young people. And I think especially people in power need to change the way some of these work. Like, I think the algorithmic content and the short form content, everything that's really just meant to suck your soul out and give into the attention economy. I think that's really horrible. And I think also either more jobs need to be made, or they need to start offering some type of, I don't know, some type of better unemployment where people can actually like live. And the problem is, even once you get employed, it's still difficult with the rising expenses. All that to be said, right? Technology's great, but I think in a couple places, specifically among mental health and financial success of younger people, is definitely starting to become a problem. It's starting to get really dystopian. It's starting to remove their actual needs, starting to remove the ability for them to meet their needs, but increase the ability for them to meet their wants, right? So you can have an AI girlfriend and watch content 20 hours a day, right? And you can be more or less entertained, but your life has no substance, and over time you're just going to kind of rot. So it's just really a shame what's happening to the younger generation based off of the greed of tech aristocrats. It's pretty sad, but I mean, as studies show, this is pretty backed up, and younger people really need to step back against this. Also, just try to reduce your technology usage to something that's healthy. Try to be a little more wholesome about it. Don't just try to not use it to avoid your problems. Like entertainment's great. It can, give you like a little bit of break, but be like very aware of what you're doing. Don't sink into numbing yourself 24/7 with technology and giving into this. Also, it's going to be more difficult to enter the workforce. It's going to be way more difficult, and you're going to have to be a lot more crafty. But something like AI does offer you a lot more like educative possibilities, right? I mean, my brother, for example, he didn't even have a college degree, and he taught himself how to code entirely from online, and now he has a great, well-paying job because he actually gained that skill from online. Hell, I learned how to rebuild an RX-7 engine from reading like online forums and watching YouTube videos. So there's definitely like an opportunity for growth here, but it's just unfortunate how much you have to push yourself to really make it in today's age. But try to use technology for some more educated benefits. Be very careful about ignoring your feelings and masking it with technology, and try to maintain your relationships a little bit better. You know, I know it's more difficult because most of us don't have much relationship skills, especially as young people, because part of our developmental era was, well, it was killed by COVID. You know, we had to stay inside for a lot of our social development era, and I think that really screwed a lot of us up, right? But yeah, just be more careful, keep fighting, and just be very aware of what technology is doing to you, and don't become a cash cow for these technology executives. Stay safe out there. Good luck and Godspeed. Thank you. This is Chiro, and I'm out.